Father Spirit, where are you? In the sky song, in the forest sounds your cry. What to give you, what to call you, what am I? Many drops are in the ocean deep and wide. Sunlight bounces off the ripples to the sky. What to give you, what to call you, am I am empty, time flies from me, what is time? Dreams eternal, fears infernal haunt my heart. What to give you, what to call you, oh my God. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, take our hearts, take our breath and let our voices sing our parts. Take our hands and let us work to shape our art.
Good morning. Welcome to the live in-person and live Zoom worship service of the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside. Our opening hymn this morning is number 347, Gather the Spirit, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, and stand and embody your spirit and join us in singing hymn number 347, Gather the Spirit.
Spirit, harness the power. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this life appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in store. Nurtured in love, conscious refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit growing in know, drawn by the moon, fed by the sun. Winter to spring, summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again.
Thank you for joining us here in person and thank you for joining us remotely by Zoom, where we will continue live streaming and posting these services on our YouTube channel for our virtual attendees. I'm Grace Preuss, a member of the worship committee, and I will be your worship associate today. Other members of the worship committee who make this service possible include Alec Peck, our music coordinator, who will also be speaking today, Adam Wedeking, who monitors our visual and online connections, and Kate Lewicki, who is in charge of our sound system. We welcome you to join this morning with an open mind and an open heart, and with muted electronic devices, please. Before we begin, we ask you to join us in a moment of silence for the devastating conflicts occurring in the world today, as we pray and hope for peace and justice. In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Thank you. We come together this morning to remind one another that we are connected in mystery and miracle, awareness and gratitude. We have come to this time and place to explore different spiritual perspectives together, develop a faith that is personally meaningful, and to bring our gifts of love and service to this community and to each other. Once again, welcome and thank you for joining us here today. Before we move into the service, there are a few announcements we'd like to share. We will mention several websites, email addresses, and phone numbers. At the end of the service, we will leave up a slide with all of this information, and it is available on our website. Joys and concerns. Sharing joys and concerns is one of the important rituals in our community. It's an opportunity to share milestones, losses, achievements, and experiences with one another. On the first Sunday of each month, we can hear from these in the sanctuary and read the contributions that we have received. For those of you at home, you can send your joys and concerns throughout the month to uuchurchofriverside@gmail.com. Our next joys and concerns will be on February 4th. The Lunar Fest book sale. Our annual book sale will be held during the Lunar Fest on January 27th and 28th. Please bring any gently used books that you no longer want taking up space for us to sell. Please see Kate if you are available to help with the sale. This year, we will be setting up in the Parish Hall on Friday, January 26th at noon and Saturday morning at 8. We will be open to the public Saturday and Sunday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Cleanup will be Monday, the 29th. We request all volunteers who are available to help us with this event. Lunch series. Join us on Saturday, February 17th at 1 p.m. to kick off the 2024 lunch series with pasta dishes. There will be good food and good fellowship. Donations are welcome and all proceeds will go to the church fund. Peace Sunday discussion. We will continue the Peace Sunday discussions on the first Sunday of the month to facilitate a meaningful dialogue on the ongoing Middle East crisis. Join us or by Zoom for the next discussion on February 4th to be held in the sanctuary at 12 p.m. The Social and Environmental Justice Committee meeting is today in the annex at 11:30 a.m. You can find the Zoom link and more information on the website under Social and Environmental Justice. I would now like to invite Adam Wedeking, Chair of the Social and Environmental Justice Committee, to tell us about the event on Friday. Adam.
Good morning. I just wanted to remind everyone one last time, I know we've talked about this before, This Friday, the 26th, here at the church at 6 p.m., we are hosting an organization called Muslim Visionaries who will lead a teach-in talking about what is happening right now in Gaza, sort of the context of the Palestinian people and what they've been through. And if you are joining us this afternoon, well, after service for our Social and Environmental Justice Committee meeting at noon, we should be joined by the guy that leads, my friend Arbaz, who leads Muslim Visionaries, will join us and talk to us about what this new organization is about and what they're up to. So join us again today at 11:30, either in the annex or here in the hall, and Friday the 26th at 6 p.m. here. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. This concludes today's announcements. And now I invite you to sit back and take a slow, deep breath as we move into the worship hour. You are welcome to read with me the mission statement of our church. Our mission is to foster a diverse religious community that celebrates life, affirms the individual, encourages spiritual growth and open thought, and works to advance social justice and environmental sustainability. Our speaker today is UUCR member Alec Peck. Alec has been a practicing UU for 23 years and has a deep passion for the intellectual and spiritual challenges which arise from exploring the 6 sources of our living tradition. He was raised in a UU church chosen by his father, who was raised Quaker, and his mother, raised Jewish, though both are humanist in practice. Alec recently spent 2 years studying natural science at Creighton University, a Jesuit institution, and is now completing his PhD at UC Riverside. UUism is built on many religious traditions which describe some specific theology, like the Judeo-Christian God or Buddhist Nirvana. However, most UUs do not find any specific representation of God to be very convincing, and many identify as atheist or agnostic. UUism instructs us to heed the guidance of reason in our spiritual journey for truth. In this sermon, we will try to apply reason and logic to deduce the possible forms which God and the spiritual world might take in the physical universe we experience. We have 2 lightings of sacred flames. The first is the occupied Indigenous Peoples Remembrance Candle. The second is the lighting of our own chalice, the symbol of our faith. We walk upon the traditional territories of diverse and sovereign peoples, the original people of this land who continue to cry out for justice and self-determination. This spot we occupy was first a sacred space of several groups of Indigenous peoples, including the Cahuilla, the Cupeño, and the Serrano. We, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside, light this sacred flame as the stewards of this sacred and holy place. We are blessed with a space and opportunity to strive to live out our common principles, to bring justice, equity, and compassion into our daily lives, to resist all that threatens the earth and her people, and to be part of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Let these thoughts carry us forth as we journey and worship together. Today's reading for the chalice lighting is A Fire in the Universe by Sean Trapp. Our chalice reminds us that the fire within ourselves is the same fire that illuminates the universe. It is our reminder that all is connected, even though the space of the void is vast, and our experience here is but a blip in the cosmic timeline. This flame is our promise that in our smallness and our short time on this earth, we live intently and deeply with love for one another, with honesty and integrity, to be guided by rational thought and critical thinking, and with a sense of shared responsibility For as the late astronomer Carl Sagan reminds us, this pale blue dot is the only home we've ever known. Thank you, Alec. Greeting our guests. We have a tradition at UUCR to welcome those who are visitors or perhaps returning after some time away. We know it can be uncomfortable to stand up and speak in front of others, and so I will now ask for a volunteer from someone who has been here a while to tell us your name and how you found out about our church. We ask you to step close to the mic and speak into it directly and clearly so everyone can hear. Please be aware that you will be visible on our Zoom camera and in the recording of this service, which is posted online. Do we have any church members who'd like to volunteer today? Thank you, Linda.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I first attended the church in the summer of 1996 when there was 30 people in the pew. On September 1st, when I walked in, there were, 125 people in the pew. Turns out that this was the first year in like 12 years that they had hired a minister, and it was her first day. That was pretty amazing, and I met a lot of good friends and a lot of good connections, so I'm still here.
Thank you, Linda. We're glad you're still here. Thank you, and that's how it's done. If you are new here, a visitor, or an old friend, please raise your hand to stand and come up to the mic in front of the pulpit. Do you have any new visitors today who'd like to introduce themselves? You can. We have a mic right here. Okay, thank you.
Yes, hello, everybody. It's glad to see you. My name is Jamie. I'm from Rural Campus. I am now retired from National Road. And I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here. I was asked, I was there for the service. I was sitting out front out here. Right now, I'm in the process of getting my Social Security transferred from out of state. And that bank, anyway, I'm having financial problems. The bank won't give me my card. So I'm moving on with this. That's why I'm here. I'm born here anyway. But I just like to thank you all thank you for the invitation and sharing with me, and thank you for allowing me to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. If there's someone online who'd like to introduce themselves, please raise your hand and we will call on you by Zoom. Let us know who you are, where you are from, and how you found out about us. Okay. For any other new guests, please join us for socializing and coffee hour after the service. We'd love to chat with you out in the parish hall, where you can also find our visitors book. Please leave your name before you leave so that we will know you are here, and leave your contact information if you'd like to know about upcoming events. For those online, the best way to get added to the mailing list is to email the church office at admin@uuchurchofriverside.org. Our hymn now is number 123, Spirit of Life, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, and stand and body your spirit, and join us in singing number 123, Spirit of Life. This portion of our service is to support our beloved historical church. This can be accomplished in several ways. In addition to the weekly collection, you may send your checks to the church address, which is shown here. You may contribute by PayPal using the QR code, which is shown here, as well as on the church website and in the newsletter. Stater Brothers Market gives our church a rebate on Stater grocery cards, which we will have in church each Sunday. Amazon gift cards are also available. You get the full value, and the church also receives a percentage for free. Please see Dinah Rowe or Robert Brown in the church office if you are interested in purchasing the gift cards. Please donate as the Spirit moves you by whatever method works best for you. Thank you for your generosity. To those who give of their time and their talent, thank you for your generous care and attention. And to all of you who have joined us here today, thank you for the gift of your presence. Will our ushers now please come forward to receive the collection? A bag will also be passed around to collect any food or hygiene items to be distributed to those in need. Thank you. Our next hymn is number 402, From You I Receive, from the Gray Hymnal. Please feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, and stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 402, From You I Receive.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, from this we live. From you I receive,
Our meditation today is entitled All Our Relations by Gary Kowalski. I invite you to get in a comfortable position, pause, and take a deep, cleansing breath. Close your eyes if you wish, and place your feet flat on the floor as you allow yourself to feel calm, peaceful, and focused. Our time is short here on the earth. Around us swirl immensities of time and space, a universe infinite in all directions. How small our hopes and cares seem amid the panorama of creation. Yet we are not separate from the cosmos, but have evolved and grown out of it, like the leaves of a tree or the waves upon the sea. And our thoughts are its thoughts. Our lives, a manifestation of never-ending vitality. Our spirits, a microcosm of the beauty and creativity of the whole. Fill us then with reverence and compassion for all who are our kin, cloud and sun, sibling and cousin, the multitude of beings who share this improbable and never to be repeated moment. All expressions like ourself, of the mind at large, the spirit at play, the dynamism at work, in whom we live and move, and whom we will never know. Now let us pause for a moment of silence. And now I'd like to introduce Alec Peck, who will be speaking to us on how would God manifest a rational approach. Alec?
Hi, good morning, and thank you all for being here today. Give me one moment. I have a few slides of my own to share. There we go. Thank you, Adam. So, thank you again for being here. Now, I'd like to start with what should be, of course, an easy question, especially for UUs. Do you believe in God? Well, this here is capital G God. This is the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic concept synonymous with Yahweh and Allah. And even if we think of this as being a more general concept, even if we say perhaps there's a singular entity, one with divine power and a consciousness that's far beyond what you and I experience, this is still not an idea which is very popular among UUs anyway, although it is certainly quite popular here in America. But what about if we say more generally, what about gods or even just less specific mystical forces? We've seen other ideas about how the spiritual world might exist, not just an old white man in the clouds. We have the Greek pantheon, often depicted with these vivid human shapes. But in Greek mythology, most often you didn't actually see them as being humanoid or being in the image of people, but instead appearing as rays of light or even swans who would come to do horrible things to women for the most part. But that's not part of this story. And we have very different ideas about the afterlife. We have all heard, I'm sure, of Christian heaven and hell, but what about the Greeks' Elysian fields, the asphodel meadows in Tartarus, or even Thor and Odin with their Valhalla afterlife? We can even look at more abstract ideas from the pagan world, the Celtic spirits, things that control illness, weather, and luck, fate, and things like that, or even more abstract Taoism, the forces of duality that push and pull us to with the whims of nature, or even a complete and total abstraction. What if there is only things like love and beauty? Those are what make up God and the sum of the entire universe, or even the sum of all humanity. Only when we consider all of the universe together do we get what God is. Well, there are so many of these forms to choose from. How do we pick one of these? And how do we say, of all these possible forms that the spiritual world might have, how does it manifest? How does it exist? It could even be absolutely nothing. There could be no spiritual world. This is the atheism. And often agnostics like these total abstractions or the atheology. And I think part of the reason why this is a popular image for a lot of people is because of logic and reason. that maybe just doesn't make a lot of sense. Logic, if we want to take logic at face value, seems to say that some forms of God maybe have logical conflicts. You might say that there should not be gods that can make a rock so heavy that they then cannot push it. Or if we look at something like more subtle, like the Christian question of evil, we can claim that God is good and omnipotent, and then he might create a world without evil, and then through some mechanism, allow evil to come into being. But if we take all this logically, if an all-powerful God wanted to have the universe be some way, then we would think logically that God would make it that way. And so if we think about this story, in addition to the assumptions of God being good, omnipotent, and all-powerful, we either need to come to a paradox that perhaps God did not make the universe as God intended, or perhaps there are more underivable assumptions about how good and evil came to be, more assumptions that we need to explain how the universe is the way that it is. And so I think it's natural to ask, what forms of God, what possible ways of existence are consistent with logic and reason? We say that the fifth source of UUism is the guidance of reason and the results of science. Those are what we say in our fifth source. And so we might say, are any of these forms of the spiritual world logically consistent? Or perhaps does reason preclude any or even all of these possible forms of God? Basically, what does God look like? What properties does God have? If I claim that I'm God, or if this mallet here were God, I would say, no, this thing doesn't even have like radiant light beams and it doesn't perform miracles. Those are the kinds of things that I'd expect God to do. But it's not just physical properties that I'm talking about. I'm also talking, in general. Yes, you can say that, I'm a human and I'm made of a singular human and I'm made of many cells. But you can also say that, my favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate. And so I might ask the same thing. Are the gods singular entity, or are there many gods? Do the gods even have a consciousness? These are all questions about what exactly is the form of the spiritual world. And do things contain the gods within them, or do the gods somehow emerge irreducibly? And if so, then from what? To ask a question scientifically is inherently an agnostic kind of process. We're saying that I don't know if the gods exist, but if they do, then what form would they take? What forms are possible? What forms can the gods take that are given the logical constraints of our universe and how we think? And this, by the way, is not something, my goal here today is not to be experience or observationally driven. This is purely a thought experiment. And I'll sometimes say the gods or God, but I really do mean all of the spiritual world in whatever form it might take, even if there is none, ultimately, if that is our conclusion, that there cannot be. But let us begin first by now that we know our question, let's define the tool set that we're going to use to answer this. So what is rationale and logic? What is the guidance of reason? I claim we're using this rational approach, but what is rationale? So in a way, this rationality is like a game. We have to start with some basic assumptions. We have to give some condition or a setup or a question that we pose. These are the things that we know, that we take to be, that we are safe, feel that we are safe to assume that they are true, given by the gods even, in an amusing turn of phrase. And then once we have our given assumptions, then we can apply logic and we can try to draw conclusions from those initial assumptions that we had. And this is how all logic works in all thought experiments. And this tool, logic, that we're going to apply, it's really mind-numbingly boring in many ways. It's a set of rules about what you're allowed to do with information. And the three basic laws, again, are so incredibly mind-numbingly dull. The law of identity, P is P. If you have a thing, it is a thing. That's what that says. Oh yeah, real helpful there. Or if P is not P. If you have something that's a thing, it can't not be not that. It's either raining or it isn't. If it's raining, it can't be not raining at the same time. But from these basic rules, we actually can derive all of the usual things that we associate with logic, like saying that if A implies B, and if B then implies C, well, then we can just say, oh, well, A implies C. This is actually in some way a result of these fundamental laws. Or if we say that A implies B, then if we don't see B, that means that A could not have happened. This is sort of a logical result that we can use. And then once we have these statements, is it raining? Did I take my umbrella? We can assign truth value to these. It either is true or it's false. Either it is raining or it's not. I took my umbrella or I didn't. And we can then make some statement about whether things are true or not, supposedly. And again, this is basically like a game in the sense that we get to pick the rules for how things work, and we get to pick the goal that we're trying to accomplish. And then using that, we say, how can we achieve that goal? And is that goal even possible given the constraints that we've set out for ourselves? In the rules of logic, we're free to choose those basic assumptions. The technical term is axiomatic system. Those are the term a math nerd would use. And this is a logical question about what is true given what we are willing to assume. And so what we're doing here is that given the assumption that the gods will take some kind of form as a positive truth statement, then what forms are allowed given what we've experienced, given logic and reason? But this statement alone is not enough to continue. Just our fundamental assumption that God, let's propose that God exists, and therefore now let's ask ourselves, what can possibly result from this? No, instead we need to apply a little bit more information. We need to know what it is we're actually looking for, which brings us to step one, setting out our assumptions. So we have to say, what is it that we're really expecting God to be like? So what are these properties that God has? And indeed, that's what we're trying to say. If the gods exist, then what properties should we want the gods to have? And if we get too specific here, then we're going to end up locked into sort of a specific idea. So if we demand that God must be male, then we're going to immediately preclude, things like pantheons or the goddess. Whereas this is maybe a little bit too specific to just be willing to assume it right off the bat. Instead, we need to somehow identify what things are most general, not simply cultural ideas like the light beams and miracles. Maybe these are simply ideas that we've gotten from our culture. Instead, we want to think about what are these properties that we expect to be more generally true? And how do we know when we've gotten as general and as most fundamental as we can get? And I think, and as I said, this is a game. You can start with any assumptions that you like. But I think a reasonable place for us to start is by looking at our common UU sources. So those are all the mainstream religions of the world, the hedons of guidance and reason, the transformative power of love. And so we can maybe take all of the world's religions and all these experiences and try to come up with some kind of basis. And so what I'm going to present now is I've summed up some things that I think represent what we think this idea of the gods should be. And I've divided them somewhat arbitrarily between a few related categories. And so this is just one possible presentation. The first is that God should be personal. Certainly the responses that I get from a lot of UUs, and if we look at UU text, is that God is about love. Just look at this slightly sappy image that I found. Love creates miracles, heals all wounds, and purifies all lower energies. This is certainly talking about love in a very divine way. And I do think that love is a good contender for the manifestation of the gods. Love is a power that is made manifest only through its actions. We cannot see or taste love, but we can feel it, and it has a measurable impact on our physical world. But I'll return to this point later, and I think there are some other possible shortcomings. We want love, or God more generally, the gods, to give us a sense of inner power and connection to the universe, something outside ourselves, something that is accessible to us directly and tells us that you are enough. That is the support the gods give us. And it is a support which never fails. And we start to see in this sort of the paradoxical nature of the gods. The gods are somehow both inherent to you and personal, but they're also completely beyond you in a way that our tiny mortal minds can never completely comprehend. And emotional subjective experience is not traditionally part of the rational process. But we still, I think we can still learn about something from this, that all religions are all representations of sort of the same thing. We all, in our way, have our own religion built into our heads. Even those who identify as Christians or Jewish have some, personal ideas about how it should be. And those representations should be somehow consistent with each other, and yet also true to our personal experience. And as a side note, I'll say that this also has to do with the source of morality, what it means to be a good person. We often think of, we think that it is the gods that somehow dictate what is good and what is evil. But we also want to attribute ideas of the origins of the universe and ourselves. Creation myths are probably one of the most recognizable aspects of religion. And more generally, we seem to see the sort of spontaneous creation of emergent systems that are things like us, the existence of consciousness and biology, unlike things like the laws of entropy, which don't imply that anything like that should necessarily exist. And if we want to explain why the universe is here in the first place, we have some expectations that whatever explanation we come up with should be consistent with the Big Bang cosmology that we've observed. But this is just a theory made by humans, one which has some problems to it, not something I have time to go into in detail now, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it. We need to explain the origins of complex systems. If we have life, then life seems to beget itself and become more complex. But it's hard to explain how we spontaneously get these more complicated systems. We want to describe our universe on this very fundamental level. And then we want to say, given these rules about how the universe works, how it became into existence, how then does it evolve and get into the state that we know now? How did we get to where we are today? And these rules for how this all should work, these seem to somehow be independent of space and time, or even beyond space and time, something that is complete. And if it's to be universal, then we need it to be consistent from one place to another and from one time to another. We say that the God should provide unbreakable laws, something that is a priori to all existence. For instance, we have we have all these kinds of physical theories for things like gravity or even alchemy for chemistry and how these things came to be. But how these things work should somehow not depend on their existence. They simply are, regardless of whether we know about them or not. And that brings us to us, the experience of existence, the fact that we exist in this universe. We believe that there should be fundamental mechanisms in the world, like cause and effect. These are the things that describe how the world works. But these are not enough to describe the emergence of consciousness, which comes out of biology. And from that, how do you explain how biology comes from chemistry? And from that, from the laws of physics? It is not possible, at least not yet, given our human tools, to explain the universe in this way. And so if we want to explain how we have this intense inner universe, then we need some explanation from the gods, perhaps, that we want to say that we, in fact, are the universe. We are literally made of the same specks that it was before there was any life in this universe. And we find that life is very different than non-life. We experience the universe around us. We have this inner universe of consciousness. And in that sense, we are the universe observing itself. On some level, we are a bunch of hydrogen wondering where it is and where it came from. And this internal consciousness is unique to every single person. Once again, it has many representations. And one of the most common themes that we see in religion as well as in consciousness are the fact that we have these complex systems. They function completely consistently, but they appear completely paradoxical. We want to say that the gods should be somehow the most basic rules of existence, and yet also provide this infinitely complex system. We want to say that the gods should be inherently understood and yet never truly understandable. We say that the gods are directly accessible to us and yet they are completely beyond us. And of course, the gods are completely outside of morality, not bound by what we consider to be good and evil, and yet they are the source of that very morality. Well, how can, the gods cannot, they are themselves dictate what is good and what is evil. And so, is there anything that can possibly satisfy all these properties? What can possibly do all of these things for us? Can we have something that describes things like entropy and the other physical laws of the universe? Can there be something that exists a priori to everything physical, that exists a priori to thought and reason itself? Can there be something which is paradoxically simple and yet also infinitely complex? Something which can have many equally valid representations, directly and personally accessible on a conceptual level. Now, I have, there we go, something that we can understand conceptually only, and we only need our minds to access the gods in the world of the divine. And I have one answer to this question, one which is perhaps boringly obvious, but maybe also elegantly simple. For a long time, Christian philosophers especially have wondered about the relationship between God and mathematics. Mathematics is something that is completely abstract and seems to not follow the rules of the universe. And I simply propose that the relationship is a simple one. It's an equal sign. Because mathematics seems to have all of these properties. The universe perhaps doesn't just have mathematical properties. Perhaps the universe has only mathematical properties. I claim, perhaps boldly, that mathematics has it all. Math satisfies all of these properties that we want. Math is something totally non-physical and yet manifests itself in the physical world. No one would deny that you have two hands, and yet two-ness is not something that you can touch or feel. Where did two-ness come from? We see exponential growth, the famous Fibonacci spirals and things like that. And of course, you need only your mind to access all of the gods and all of mathematics. You don't need to go out and count anything or feel pain in order to know all of the rules of math. And of course, we have no hope of truly understanding God or math, but of course, perhaps we already knew that. And math and God can be found in every emergent system that we have discovered. Even in these complex, this simulation that I'm showing you here is from John Conway, and yet it follows very simple mathematical rules, yet it wiggles and writhes very much the way that we might attribute to life. This is an image of, and so this thing is called Conway's Game of Life. Excuse me. And math and both math and the gods are incredibly abstract, totally abstract, in fact, and yet somehow it is linked to the very fundamental rules of how everything works. In both math and the gods, you can have infinite, equally true, and sometimes incompatible representations. Yes, indeed, we see that very complex systems can be driven by very simple mechanisms which are themselves very complex. Here, for instance, is a number game that children can play. There's an idea of happy numbers, which has to do with their digits. But all numbers, it turns out, fall into this natural structure, which forms when you play this simple game of multiplying and adding. And we did not invent this structure. I think it would be horribly arrogant to say that we humans invented this structure that we call the melanchoil. And there's another idea that says you can take any number, any whole number, 1, 2, 3, and you should always be able to find two prime numbers that when you add them together, that will give you can always sum up two prime numbers and get any number you want. This is a pretty simple statement. Even a grade schooler can see that it's obviously true even. We can hear some examples in this triangle. If you try it yourself, you can quickly find that any number you can clearly do this with. And yet, if you want to prove with absolute certainty that this is true, you find that it is impossible. All of our current mathematical tools cannot solve this problem called Goldbach's conjecture. And mathematics itself is very fractal-like. The pattern, the math of physics describes the motion of individual particles perhaps very well, and that is certainly considered the most fundamental rules of physics. And yet, when we look inside something like the proton, it's a horrible and complete mess. Turns out we actually have no idea what's going on inside there. It must emerge from some even more complex system of very complicated mathematics that I dare not show you, which is almost completely mind-boggling, and yet gives us these simple particles. This image here is the Mandelbrot set, one of the most well-known fractals. It's a snowman shape, but has along its edge an infinite complexity along its edges. And it's actually governed by an incredibly simple equation, one shown here with just Z and C with a few recognizable math symbols that aren't too important. And I'll show one more little math treat. This is the dragon curve, a fractal which it feels to me like it was a trick played on us by the gods. Because as you bend, and if you imagine perhaps a piece of paper that you can fold in half and then unfold it into this V shape, or fold it twice and you get the second sort of pot shape with a handle. But as you keep going and you keep folding and unfolding, you get this stranger and stranger pattern, a pattern that has an infinite number of turns and twists, and yet it never overlaps itself. This pattern will never act, it creates this solid-looking shape, and yet there are no overlaps. So how of all these crazy and complex things is it all possible? And even in our universe, all of the immense complexity of general relativity, our most powerful theory for how gravity works, can be governed by a simple equation, g mu nu equals t mu nu. Now, those Greek letters are perhaps a bit scary, and I'm not going to tell you what they mean, but it turns out that this is an incredibly elegant, an incredibly simple representation, and yet this equation holds all of the information about how the planets dance with each other. Indeed, it is telling us about a very fundamentally beautiful phenomenon. It says that G, the form of gravity, is equal to T, the distribution of matter. That the shape of gravity is dictated by the distribution of where the matter is, and where the matter is dictated by where the gravity is. A cosmic and intertwined dance that never stops. I'm also going to show you here, this is a picture of Emmy Noether, whose theorem we use to describe our very universe. A quote from the physicist Hermann Weyl: "Symmetry, as wide or as narrow as we may define its meaning, is one idea by which man throughout the ages has tried to comprehend and create order, beauty, and perfection." Noether's theorem, and there's an equation here from that theorem, demonstrates a fundamental link between the geometrical, mathematical properties of our universe and the physical properties that we physicists claim that matter has, that we observe on a quantum level. That the fact that these symmetries exist, something that we think of as an entirely mathematical and abstract concept, somehow causes the physical properties that we experience in the quantum world. Now, I'm showing you this equation, not because I expect you to understand it necessarily, but perhaps for the same reason why they show Latin scripture in a Roman Catholic church, simply because it is holy. Now, I think a lot of people will hear this claim that that the gods themselves are mathematics. And I think the obvious response to that is, really? Math? That thing that I hated in high school? And I say, yes, really. And I'm going to come back to that. I think there are a few common issues that people have with mathematics, and they're very understandable. Math is anti-artistic because you're either right or you're wrong. Like if I were to say 1 + 1 is equal to 0. Well, mathematics is actually quite playful. It's actually quite forgiving. Just as the gods, I would say. I can say that 1 + 1 = 0. And is that wrong? Have I been smited by the gods? No. I can say it, and it's perfectly fine. And if I claim that 1 + 1 is equal to 0, well, then what I haven't actually made a false statement. What I've done is I've discovered the thing that mathematicians call binary numbers. This is the basis of this magical miracle device that I'm using to show you these slides. If without these binary numbers, we would not have all of our computers. And so the idea of right and wrong is context dependent. Indeed, you can set up any mathematical axioms you want, and you can have a consistent system. You get to, in math, in true math anyway, you get to choose the rules, whatever you want them to be. But I also think that mathematics is hard to do. And this is a big sticking point as well. But I never claimed that I would make understanding God easy, or that this would somehow enlighten you in any way. And I think it's kind of like the way that we look at a beautiful painting. It's very pretty, and I can certainly appreciate its artistic skill. But what if you asked me to now paint it? Well, I can't. Definitely not. I am not a very good painter, but I can still appreciate its beauty. And I think mathematics is very much the same way. Simply because some people are not good at math does not mean that it is not divine. And in fact, I wouldn't expect mere mortals to be good at doing the work of the divine. But I think another good comeback is that math is simply too simple. It's too simple and boring to explain high concepts, especially something like love. How can I possibly take something as glorious and beautiful as love and consciousness and try to claim that it can be explained by simple high school algebra? Well, here is the equation of the quantum field theory. And this explains some pretty damn complicated things, I'd like to say. And this is just some calculus, a branch of mathematics that non-physicists barely pay any attention to. And I don't think we would claim that this is a simple equation, nor I don't think many would claim that this is something that would be easy to apply and understand. And perhaps it is just as mind-bogglingly complicated as love. And I have used a lot of physics examples to tie math to our physical world. But unlike physics, math and the gods are not bound by the limits of this universe. And so I want to address a couple little loose ends. So coming back to love for a moment. One of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite movies, "The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return." God is love and acceptance for oneself and for others. And the gods love you. And I think we all feel that the gods should fill us with joy. But math is something that fills a lot of people with discomfort. And especially depending on your experience, maybe even some contempt. Although I would say this is something that, again, math has in common with with God. Certainly, I think there are a lot of UUs who are ex-Catholics and Christians who think about their bitter experiences with God, perhaps in the same way we might think about our bitter experiences with our high school algebra teachers. And God should be personally inspirational. And in mathematics may be inspiring to me as a physicist, but math perhaps doesn't seem magical or inspirational to most people. But I don't know if the gods care. The gods and God is like a force of nature. It's totally beyond our control, and it's totally beyond our consideration. It's even beyond us humans. Even the God of the Old Testament, quite unloving in many ways, acting much more like a force of nature than the Christian God. And I will admit that I did pull a little bit of a trick on you. By using this so-called logical approach, in a way, we have started with a fundamental assumption that the manifestation of God should follow mathematical constructs, because logic is itself a mathematical system. And so we might have said, if God follows mathematical constructs, then God can only be a mathematical construct. If we believe in logic and reason, then God must exist in the form of mathematics. And this is the kind of paradox that we really might expect to see if we really investigate God properly, thoroughly. So I don't find this too surprising. And as a side note for the mathematically inclined, there's a fellow named Kurt Gödel, a German mathematician, who has a bit of a problem with axiomatic systems. He has this incompleteness theorem, which says that perhaps universality and self-consistency of mathematics is something that we took just for granted. Since some informal logic in axiomatic systems, you may find yourself in a strange situation where something must be true, and yet it is also impossible to prove, given those assumptions. And this alone, I think, does not scar the perfection of mathematics, and I think it is itself just another beautiful mystery for us to unravel. And so where does this leave us? What is my point in all this? And in fact, I think all of this, in a way, is kind of obvious. And I think the point is really the simplicity of it itself. Again, we have a long history of philosophizing about this relationship between this completely abstract existence of mathematics and the existence of the gods. And we have these scientific theories which say that we should try to minimize our assumptions. And it feels like there is some kind of truth in this interpretation. And yet, this is not exactly but is this really a helpful conclusion? I don't think it's exactly a helpful thing to say, but I also don't think that any particular conclusion we come here would be helpful. I don't think it's necessary to understand this idea, this relationship between God, the gods, and the mathematics, to understand God itself or to apply it to be a good person, just as you don't need to know anything of mathematics in order to be able to benefit from its results. And I don't know if this claim can in itself bring us any closer to the divine. But again, I don't think any spiritual truth will necessarily inherently make you more divine yourself. Although I do think that learning some actual math just might, if that is in fact your goal. And so how do we get from the math, this abstract thing, to something that is meaningful to us? God is the hugging of a crying child. The gods are finding peace with yourself. God is standing up against injustice. The gods mean coming to an understanding, and what we are doing is coming to an understanding of the mathematical nature of God, and that will not help us to accomplish any of these things. But I do not think any orthodoxy would. And so I would like to end on a practical note, because I think one big problem that people have with math is fundamentally a problem with math education. And because math education is just not very good right now. And the math of God must be interpreted, as always, by the word of man. And math education has a race problem, and a gender problem, and a class problem, and an intersectionality between these things. To deny someone access to math, in my view, is to deny them access to God. Truly a horrible injustice. And there is an unparalleled awe and fulfillment I have found in mathematical discovery, a beauty that is lost in all of the missed opportunities of people who were told that they were not the right kind of person to be doing math. Ramanujan, an Indian mathematician, was born into immense poverty, and his contributions to the world could have been so much greater if he had been given the resources to cultivate that gift. It's impossible to know how many Ramanujans have been lost to the generations because of prejudice and privilege. And that's why I've given a few links here relating to solving some of those injustices, at least as it relates to one of my personal hills to die on, which is equal access to education, and in particular math and science. And I think many of these issues fall on people like me, the scientists and mathematicians. But I would also ask you to consider this to be a pressing social issue. I encourage you to encourage your daughters and your nieces. Tell them that they have the power to profess the language of the gods, that there are and that these resources here can be used to find modern female role models. We need to acknowledge that our fallible teaching methods are not themselves the universal laws of the gods that we are trying to access. And so these are some nice resources for helping women in STEM and for people who care about women in STEM. Math has shown me the glory of the gods, and that is the kind of salvation from which no person should ever be discouraged. And so with that, I will end my talk and hand it back to Adam to present the rest of our the rest of the service. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Our closing hymn is number 354, We Laugh, We Cry, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Stand and body your spirit and join us in singing number 354, We Laugh, We Cry.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die. We dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found our need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer. A child is born among us and we feel a special glow. We see time's endless journey as we watch the baby and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found our time to be together. And with the grace of age, we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder, and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we shared with friends, they will linger on, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow, we have the gift to believe that peace within a living is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to make sense of what we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found our joy being together. And in our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see, even to question truly is an answer.
Remembering that the universe is so much larger than our ability to comprehend. Let us go forth from this time together with the resolve to stop trying to reduce the incomprehensible to our own petty expectations, so that wonder, that sense of what is sacred, can find space to open up our minds and illumine our lives. Namaste, amen, and blessed be. Thank you, Alec, for sharing your valuable time and insights with us this morning. This is one of my favorite sermons that I've heard here. It is sincerely appreciated, and we look forward to seeing you again. For those of you who would like to stay in the sanctuary for 10 to 15 minutes for questions or to share some discussion or observations from the service, please remain in the sanctuary or online. Please be aware that these comments will be posted online. For the rest of you, you are now welcome to adjourn into the parish hall. Would anyone like to come up and share their thoughts?
Thank you very much for one thing. That was fun. Speaking as a man who has basically faced mathematics with the general skill of the town drunk versus Zorro, instead of I write the Z upon you, it is, dear mother, it is with greatest urgency I write this letter to you upon the features of this unfortunate gringo who seems to have a continued weakness against Perry overhead left. And that is me versus math. So it used to be there was an adversarial thing. But when you failed enough math classes, there's a poetry that succumbs from those failures. For example, statistics. You wind up getting, you wind up needing, say, guess the exact amount of timber in this sanctuary here. I might need a computer. I didn't grow up with trees, so I'm not really good at counting the amount of lumber feet. You start a general guess, a lumberman, I could make a guess. A lumberman would make a better guess. A lumberman who knew how to use a computer and had a staff would have it down to the micron. but there's still a I'm not sure here thing goes. The thing I like about what we're doing here when you're striving to find God in the numbers is to realize that there is a certain time when the most religious, loving thing you can do is not sweat the last decimal point. My gosh. And that's not what we got here. There was an idea that says, do expect it to manifest, but that the universe that has room enough for a clod like me in this world has room for the gracious people that I see around me in this world. And that whether or not I count as a win or a loss, knowing that the dance can manifest in so many different ways across the line makes me, number one, not to block anyone from math. Number two, if I know the math, not to use it as a club to beat the tar out of somebody who's different from me just because of the color of their skin or whatnot. And to realize that the devil may be in the details, but God is in the blur. And of course, the other way around, which makes the entire statement really tough.
I think you all know me. I'm Pat Colander. I'm a mathematician. I was a mathematician before I was a psychologist. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in math. And I reject, no, math isn't God. God should be warm, right? And math is cold. Anyway, that's what I think. Yeah, I don't know. This could have gone all kinds of ways. And it made me think about, I wonder what many of you would say, like what do you believe or how do you construct whatever your spiritual thing is? Because it's different for everybody. It's really amazing. But I did want to say, because this came to me in the middle of it, one of my reasons for being pretty much agnostic is that things like the design of the human being, where the human brain is at the end of the vascular tree instead of in the middle, since it's the most important part. It's like that's a major design flaw that nobody who was designing a human would have done that way. Anyway, that's my thought for today. Thanks.
So in response to your statement that math is cold, Pat, I've heard that Bach, the music of Bach, is the musical manifestation of math, and it is not cold. In my opinion, it is not cold. Mozart too. Right. So that's an opinion. And another thing I wanted to share was I'll never forget a high school teacher who told me that my math answers were too creative. And she said that the only mathematicians who can be creative in their math are accountants.
And at the mention of those two composers, I just wanted to say, when the angels play for God, they play Bach, but when they play for each other, they play Mozart.
I was wondering if the math in you would allow me to give you a hug, because I felt really inspired.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you for being.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go with most of that because my interpretation of God is that God is the universe. And the universe is created of energy, and energy has a mathematical formula. Therefore, my God is absolutely mathematical.
My concept of God would be that there's got to be something to negate the survival of the fittest, and a creator with an interest in all of us is a logical replacement for no creator and individuality.
I'd like to quickly mention, I identified as basically atheist or agnostic for a long time. And I found that, and certainly when and this goes for theists as well, but when I ask atheists about what they believe, it's easy to say that they don't believe in God, or that I don't believe in God. But then when you ask, okay, what is God? What is that thing that you don't believe in? Tell me, God is just a word. If I don't know what that word meant, then, how would you tell me what is that concept, that thing that you're rejecting? And it's very difficult to narrow that down. It's perhaps easy to say, oh, I don't believe in white male Christian God who sent his only son, who is also himself down to earth. But then you might say, well, I also don't believe in this and that. And there's a whole bunch of these ideas that again, we might attribute to God, or even the idea that something can exist which is completely non-physical, yet somehow has some impact on our universe. And so, do you believe that exists? And then whether or not that is God is sort of the question that I wanted, is part of this. What I had, I wanted to share a few of the comments from the Zoom. Sorry, so I won't say the names since these were shared just in the Zoom chat. But one of our Zoom attendees says that this reminds them of the geometric designs of the Islamic mosques and how that has been used to express the divinity of Allah. And another comment from another attendee. I absolutely love the sermon. For several years, I have been involved in a physical sciences book group. Many of our monthly selections have covered this topic. It proved to me to be my favorite of all of our subjects. I am math illiterate, and so I appreciate the beauty of the elegant equations used by physicists to explain the origins of the universe. I'm always seeking to learn more about this subject. And thank you. And thank you, anonymous commenter. Sorry for cutting off anyone else who wanted to give comments.
Well, if the church will indulge me, I may have to bring all my little projects that I built. I fell in love with electromagnetic phenomenon as a child. And so my going to college was to learn about electricity and magnetism. And because of that, the things that I built, like an all-band crystal radio, I had to figure out with high school algebra how to wind all the coils. And so math became a useful tool for me. Therefore, it was not boring at all for me in high school because I had a use for it. Then in college, eventually I fell in love with the concept that, as one mathematician who said, who graduated, and I said, can you sum up what we experienced as math grads? He said, patterns. I thought, that's right. What you do is eventually you fall in love with patterns that you see in mathematics if you take enough math. But before that, I think it works well to have an interest that leads you to view math initially as a tool so that you are attracted to it and you will attempt to manipulate it. Otherwise, I think it does appear very boring. So I think it's a matter of interest that drives where the math appears enticing and not that hard as you study it, or if it forever looks bewildering and something that you hate. Thank you.
Walt's comments just reminded me, after I finished my bachelor's degree in math, I went to work at a think tank, and I was in operations research, which is the use of mathematics to solve problems, just that broadly. And we did all kinds of things. It was a great job, and it was so much fun. But math is a really excellent tool, and not the abstract, wonderful things that physics has, but just like calculus and what you can do with calculus and simulations and building. And we did all that stuff. It was really fun. Anyway, that's it.
I see you stepping up, Bill. I will inject one other comment, a little complaint about math education again. Math education, and then Diane, you can step up after that. Math education leads a lot of people to believe that calculus is like the holy grail of mathematics. Once you know calculus, that's like the most mathematical math there is. And as I alluded to, calculus is not actually a huge area of interest for pure mathematicians. There's so much beyond that in number theory and combinatorics and statistics that has no bearing on our universe. The calculus is sort of the mathematics of our universe. And so it's just so much bigger than that. Bill and then Diane.
You mentioned something about the old, can man make a rock, can God make a rock that he then subsequently cannot lift? It was supposed to be a little bit of a trap that was laid for the religious people. And the answer, I heard an answer to it that I found glorious. Of course he can make a rock that he cannot lift. It is called human will. Thus, you wind up with the idea of, shall I at any given moment make myself transparent or translucent to the will of God, to possibly the inconvenient ones that demand better behavior from me that I might be in the mood to give, or the call to mission, what have you. But the idea being that you were talking solitaire earlier, a similar game to solitaire's mahjong, but no matter. There's one idea that's rather bloody about it, which is kind of why I say, okay, we're just going to take Christ, detach him, and attach him to a better class of deity than you are. But the idea is this: God gives himself a lousy weekend, has about 1/3 of his life force temporarily extinguished, and goes into the field of death and does the whole resurrection shuffle. But in doing so, manages to grab a whole lot of spares. He's picking up points from a discard pile, if you will, in the card thing. And otherwise, what God is doing is trying to say, since God cannot deal with free will, God basically takes a group of believers, whether they're Allah-shaped believers, Judaic believers, or Christian believers, grabs them into the keeper pile and is quite willing to discard the rest of us. I regard that as being exceedingly shoddy behavior, and that any God of class and true mercy would not like that, because it is a retreat and it's basically no better than, frankly, the survival rate of a group of jellyfish eggs. Therefore, one way to handle that bleak statement is to simply say that God is trying to manifest that free will more often and better and at a higher level. And thus, having a faith, for example, that has the sower making sure that all the seeds are considered works of God and that they are all in some form properly germinated, that we do draw from multiple traditions. that is the kind of a God who not only fears free will, would like to see you have a few differences as long as you don't blow each other's heads off over the whole thing. And that diversity is not only makes us stronger, but happier if we can just get used to it once in a while. Yeah, you eat. St. Pat's is coming up. We, Adam gave us some nice Palestinian pastry the other day. Let's make that free will something that is actually a celebration of all of us, rather than it's the enemy. You can have free will, but oh, God will damn you for it. Let's try the other way. Sounds like fun. It sounds like a good approach.
I don't come up to the mic too often, and I don't have my thoughts all together, but I want to thank you. I was extremely moved and impressed by the connections that you were making, and food for thought. I'm going to give you a piece of information you may be aware of, may not. About a year ago at this time, I lost a very dear young woman, a friend of my daughter's, who was a math teacher at a high school here in Riverside. She was such a brilliant woman and so full of love. And she believed in math, and very few women were as dedicated to teaching math and inspiring other teachers to teach math as this woman who passed away. At her funeral, it filled, she was not of this faith or of a faith that you might recognize, but she was a lady who filled the church temple, because that's what it was, completely with people. They went outside of that. Everyone came from everywhere to honor this lady who'd passed away, this young woman. A scholarship was set up, and this lady was a STEM mathematics. That was her background. And there is a scholarship out there at that high school right now, if people contribute to it, that will go on in her name for every year for women to go into math or science, STEM. And that was the brilliance of this woman. Now, why I mention this is because it's an example of hope for women to continue as that STEM you had listed up there. Above and beyond that is the fact that maybe it will give many people an opportunity, at least us that heard it today. And I hope that message that you've done can continue on and can be broadcast somewhere else. I don't know. But it shows that it is universal. And it isn't just one way. There are many roads we can take. But if we follow that universal concept, we'll find it. And math definitely makes sense from what you were saying. And that's what our little lady who passed away, Kara Gilman, did while she was alive, inspired others, and also believed in the value of mathematics and science. It's a nice combo because she also was dedicated to her faith, her belief in learning, knowledge, and expanding her universe. And she will hopefully continue to expand others who follow in her footsteps. That scholarship is out there every year, hopefully as long as people contribute to it. Thank you for listening. That was my little plug for combinations and universal thinking. Bye.
And we are pushing past 11:30 now, so if there's one more really burning comment, and if not, then we can all have a great rest of our Sunday and have some coffee. And seeing nothing online, I say that we adjourn, we have some coffee, and we call it a day. Thank you again for all being here.